All right, so today we're gonna dive into something that sounds, kind of bureaucratic and maybe a little dry,
Uh-huh.
but I think you're gonna find this really interesting, I promise.
Okay.
It's about this whole thing with the European Union
Okay.
and their own separate list of high-risk countries
Okay.
when it comes to money laundering and terrorism financing.
I see. Yeah.
Now, you might be thinking,
Yeah.
wait a minute, isn't there already a global list for this kind of stuff? Like,
Right.
isn't that what the Financial Action Task Force, the FATF, is
Yeah.
for?
Yeah, that's right.
And and you'd be absolutely right. The FATF does keep tabs on countries that, aren't exactly doing their homework when it comes to
Yeah.
fighting dirty money.
Right.
But for some reason, the EU decided, hey, we're going to have our own list too.
Yeah.
So that's what kind of got us scratching our heads a little bit.
Sure.
Luckily, though, we've got an expert here with us today. Someone who's actually, gone through this mountain of legal documents
Yeah.
and helped us, figure this out.
Mhm.
So maybe you could start us off here.
Right.
Like, why does the EU even need its own list?
So it's actually,
I mean, the FATF is already doing this thing.
So it's a matter of law.
okay.
The EU,
Yeah.
any financial institution in the EU is legally bound
Okay.
to use the EU list, not the FATF list.
So it's not even like optional for them.
It's not optional.
They have to use the EU list.
That's correct.
okay.
So even if the FATF, raises a red flag about a country,
Yeah.
it doesn't automatically mean that, say, a bank in Paris
Uh-huh.
has to treat that country as high risk.
They have to look at
They
the
have to look at the EU list.
EU list first.
Correct.
Got it. So that means then
Yes.
like every time I'm sending, let's say, money to a friend in I don't know, Morocco or something,
Uh-huh.
my bank is actually checking.
Morocco against this EU list
Yeah.
to make sure they're not, accidentally helping fund something shady.
That's exactly right.
Wow.
And if they fail to do that,
Yeah.
they could face some pretty serious consequences.
Like what?
We're talking fines, we're talking sanctions,
Yeah.
the whole 9 yards, really.
The EU's not messing around.
The EU is serious about financial crime.
Got it.
Yeah.
So no bank's going to take that lightly.
Not if they're smart.
But you mentioned something earlier about the EU list, going above and beyond what the FATF looks at.
Right.
So what else is on their radar?
This is where things get really interesting, actually.
Okay.
The EU takes a much wider approach.
Okay.
They take into account things like corruption levels in a country,
Uh-huh.
how strong their government institutions are,
Yeah.
even things like data protection violations.
Wait. Data protection.
Yes.
That's kind of out of left field, isn't it?
It is.
I wouldn't have thought that would be connected to
Right.
money laundering or terrorism financing.
But it is.
Okay.
And that's what's so fascinating about the EU's approach.
Right.
They really see financial crime
Okay.
as part of a much bigger system.
Okay.
You have weak data protection in a country
Uh-huh.
that creates vulnerabilities that criminals can exploit.
Okay. Yeah.
Imagine a country where it's super easy to steal someone's identity.
Yeah.
That's stolen info.
Yeah.
Could be used to open fake accounts, funnel money around, you name it.
Okay, so now I'm starting to see how data protection kind of fits into the puzzle.
Exactly.
It's not just about the money itself, it's about
It's about the whole system.
the whole system, yeah.
Right.
All the ways it can be manipulated.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And this is where the EU and FATF lists
Yeah.
can actually end up looking quite different.
How so?
You might have a country that's flagged by one but not the other. It all depends on how they weigh these different factors.
So for institutions,
Yeah.
this seems like a lot to keep track of.
It is.
What are the real world consequences if they get this wrong?
The consequences are serious.
Yeah.
And they go way beyond just, fines.
Okay.
Imagine a bank, let's say,
Uh-huh.
fails to properly assess the risk of a particular country
Yeah.
and ends up processing transactions
Okay.
linked to, let's say, a sanctioned individual
Uh-huh.
that could be devastating.
Yeah.
Just the reputational damage alone.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
no bank wants to be known as the shady bank.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
the place to go to fund, illicit activities.
Nobody wants that label.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then beyond the reputational hit,
Uh-huh.
you could have legal action,
Okay.
loss of business,
Yeah.
even restrictions on operating in certain markets.
Yeah, so the stakes they're pretty high then.
Absolutely.
But it sounds like the EU isn't just, throwing a bunch of rules at institutions and saying, like, figure it out.
Right.
They're giving them some guidance. Right.
They are. It's not a do this, don't do that situation.
Right. Okay.
The EU really emphasizes what they call a risk-based approach.
Okay.
It's kind of like, you're deciding whether to wear a helmet when you're cycling, right?
Yeah.
Even if you're just on a quiet street,
Uh-huh.
there might not be a law saying you have to wear a helmet,
Yeah.
but you might choose to
Yeah.
because you've assessed the risk
Right.
and you decide it's worth it.
Okay, so that means even if a country's not on the EU list,
Uh-huh.
a bank might still decide, hey, you know what? We're going to treat this as high risk
That's exactly what
based on our own internal checks and balances.
Precisely.
Got it.
They might have specific concerns about that country's legal system
Uh-huh.
or how effectively they actually enforce regulations,
Okay.
even if those factors haven't quite reached the level for inclusion on the official EU list.
So it's like a healthy dose of caution is always encouraged?
Absolutely. It's about being proactive
Okay.
and taking a thoughtful approach to managing risk
Okay.
rather than simply reacting to a checklist of rules.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
This is a lot for these institutions to handle.
it is.
I mean, they've got to be on top of global trends. They've got to know all the EU directives, their
Yeah.
own internal assessments.
Yeah,
It's a lot to juggle.
it is a lot. It definitely requires some serious expertise.
Uh-huh.
And that's actually why financial crime compliance
Yeah.
has become such a specialized field.
Okay.
These professionals, they need to understand not just like the letter of the law,
Yeah.
but also like the spirit of it,
Right.
the bigger picture of what the EU is trying to do.
So I imagine it's a little bit like being a detective, right? They're
Exactly.
constantly like piecing together these clues,
Yes.
looking for these patterns that might signal something suspicious is going on.
You're spot on. It's not just about checking boxes.
Wow.
It's about like connecting the dots
Okay.
and making judgment calls
Yeah.
based on, a deep understanding of the risks involved.
And I'm guessing this isn't a static field, right?
Definitely not.
I mean, they've got to be constantly learning, constantly adapting
Always evolving, always.
to these new threats
Uh-huh.
and challenges that keep popping up.
Yeah, new technologies, new criminal tactics, geopolitical shifts, you name it.
It all factors in.
It all matters, yeah.
Speaking of resources, though, does the EU offer any support
They do.
to these institutions
Yeah.
that are trying to navigate this very complex world?
They do. They do.
Because I can't imagine it's easy, especially for smaller banks,
Right.
to keep up with all of these changes.
It's not, but they do offer support.
Okay, so what kind of support are we talking about here?
Well, the EU publishes a lot of reports and assessments that really go into detail about the specific risks associated with,
Yeah.
different countries,
Okay.
different sectors.
Okay.
They also issue best practice guidelines
Okay.
for due diligence
Mhm.
and risk mitigation.
So it's not just about setting the bar high.
Right.
It's also about, like, giving them the tools.
Yeah, providing the tools and guidance to actually reach that bar.
So there's a collaborative element to this.
There is.
It's not just the EU, like,
Sure.
cracking down on financial crime.
Right.
It's about working with institutions
It is.
to create, like, a more robust system overall.
It's a partnership. The goal isn't to punish, it's to prevent.
Okay.
It's about promoting a culture of compliance,
Mm-hmm.
encouraging institutions to be proactive in identifying and mitigating risks.
So it's like a partnership,
Exactly.
recognizing that everyone's got a role to play in
Right.
keeping the financial system safe.
It's a shared responsibility.
Uh-huh.
Governments set the framework. Regulators oversee the implementation.
Right.
And the financial institutions actually put those rules into practice.
With all this talk about the EU's approach, though,
Yeah.
I can't help but wonder, like, what does this actually mean for the global effort to combat financial crime?
Right.
Is the EU having its own separate list?
Yeah.
Does that actually fragment things?
That's the million-dollar question.
Or does it make the system stronger?
Yeah, it's a complex issue.
Uh-huh.
And there are valid arguments on both sides.
Yeah. Like what?
Well, some argue that having all these different lists
Yeah.
just creates confusion.
Makes it harder.
And it makes it really hard for institutions
Yeah.
to navigate, this global landscape.
Uh-huh.
They worry that criminals could, exploit these inconsistencies.
Yeah, it's like if every country had different traffic laws, right?
Exactly.
It would just be complete chaos.
Complete chaos.
So I get that.
But on the other hand, there's this argument that the EU's approach is actually a positive force.
Okay.
It's like it's pushing other countries
To step up.
step up their game.
Okay.
It's like, a little bit of friendly competition.
Yeah.
Where everyone's striving to have the most robust system.
So the EU taking this strong stance
Right.
could actually inspire others to follow suit.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Because ultimately, a more robust and transparent global financial system
Yeah.
benefits everyone, right?
Makes sense.
Whether that happens through, harmonization or competition remains to be seen. But what is clear is that the EU is, pushing the conversation forward.
This deep dive has been really eye-opening,
It's a fascinating topic.
It's made me realize that financial crime compliance, it's not just about, ticking boxes. It's about, understanding the complexities of this globalized world that we live in.
Absolutely.
And the constant need to adapt.
Constant need to adapt, yeah.
So to bring this all back around,
Yeah.
why does the EU need its own list?
Right.
When we already have the FATF list?
It's not about duplication, it's about diversification.
Oh, okay.
It's about the EU list allows them to, tailor their approach
Yeah.
to financial crime to address their specific regional concerns and priorities.
Yeah. Okay.
It gives them the flexibility to take a broader view, considering factors like data protection,
Right.
which, as we talked about, plays a surprisingly significant role.
So it's like they're casting a wider net,
Exactly.
They're looking beyond just the traditional money laundering hotspots and considering a broader range of risks.
That's exactly right. And that's what makes this topic so compelling, I think. It highlights this tension between global standards and regional priorities, the need for collaboration, but also the desire for autonomy.
Yeah.
The EU is walking this tightrope. And they're doing it in a very deliberate and strategic way.
And as we've seen, it's not just about, rules and punishment.
No, it's not.
It's about building a culture of compliance.
It is.
And encouraging these institutions to be true partners in
right.
this fight against financial crime.
A shared responsibility.
So what does this all mean for our listeners?
Well, it means that understanding the EU's approach to financial crime is absolutely crucial.
Okay.
For anyone involved in the global financial system, really. Whether you're, a business operating in Europe, an investor looking at cross-border transactions, or even just a citizen who's concerned about the integrity of the system.
So it means paying attention to the nuances, those differences between the FATF list and the EU list.
Absolutely.
And recognizing that compliance isn't just about checking boxes. It's about understanding the bigger picture.
It's about awareness.
Yeah.
Being aware of the risks, but also, being aware of the opportunities.
Okay.
Because a more robust and transparent financial system benefits everyone.
So as we wrap up this deep dive today, I want to leave you with a thought-provoking question.
Okay.
Does the EU's approach, with its separate list and its broader focus, does it make the global financial system safer or more fragmented?
That's the big question.
Yeah.
And
that's what I want people to think about.
It's a tough one. There's no easy answer, I don't think. It's probably a bit of both. The EU's actions, they might create some friction in the short term.
Yeah.
But in the long run, they could actually be a catalyst for positive change.
Maybe it's like a healthy dose of disruption.
I like that, yeah.
It kind of shakes things up, forces everyone to reevaluate their assumptions, and hopefully leads to a better outcome in the end.
A little constructive chaos
Yeah.
can sometimes be a good thing.
Well, I think we've definitely given our listeners plenty to chew on today.
I think so.
This has been a fascinating deep dive, I think,
It has.
into the world of EU financial crime compliance.
Absolutely.
It's a complex topic,
It is.
but it's one that has,
Right.
real world implications for all of us.
It really does. And I hope this conversation has inspired our listeners to keep exploring these issues,
Yeah.
to keep asking critical questions.
Because as we always say on the deep dive,
Yeah.
the more we understand, the better equipped we are to make a difference.
To make a difference, exactly.
So keep digging, keep questioning, and keep learning.
Keep learning.
Yeah, it really feels like they're trying to walk this fine line balancing that global cooperation with their own regional priorities.
Right.
I mean, the EU is, a major economic force.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that they would want to have, some influence on the global stage, right?
Absolutely.
But doing that while still, trying to uphold those international standards, that's got to be tricky.
It's a delicate balance for sure.
And we saw how those values sometimes lead them to take this broader approach.
Right.
Like with the data protection thing.
Yeah, that's a good example.
That was a real aha moment for me. It really shows you how interconnected everything is.
Yeah, it really does.
In the modern world, right?
Absolutely. Everything's connected.
So if I'm a business operating in Europe, or even just, someone who cares about where their money's going. What's the big takeaway from all of this?
I think the biggest takeaway is awareness.
Okay.
Don't just assume that because something's, okay in one part of the world, that it's automatically okay everywhere.
Right.
The EU is setting a high bar, and businesses and individuals, they need to be informed. They need to be prepared.
So it's not just about checking boxes on a compliance checklist.
It's not just about going through the motions.
Yeah. It's about understanding
the why.
Yeah.
Why are these rules in place?
Yeah.
And making sure your actions are actually aligned with the bigger goals.
Right. So it's almost like having a moral compass.
Yes.
As well as a legal one.
Absolutely. That's a great way to put it.
And that kind of brings us back to that question we posed earlier.
Yeah.
Does the EU's approach with the separate list, the broader focus, does it make the global financial system safer or more fragmented?
That's the tough one.
Yeah.
And
what do you think?
I don't think there's a simple yes or no answer.
Okay.
It's probably a bit of both.
Okay.
The EU's actions, they might create some friction in the short term, but, in the long run, they could actually be a catalyst for positive change.
Yeah, maybe it's like a healthy dose of disruption,
I like that, yeah.
It kind of shakes things up, forces everyone to rethink things.
Reevaluate those assumptions.
And hopefully, it leads to a better outcome for everyone.
Right. A little bit of constructive chaos can be a good thing.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about today.
A lot to chew on.
This has been a really fascinating deep dive into this world of EU financial crime compliance.
It's a complex world.
It's complex.
But it's important.
But it's so important for all of us.
And it affects everyone.
Yeah. And I really hope this conversation has kind of inspired people to keep learning about these issues.
You keep digging.
To keep asking those tough questions.
Keep asking questions.
Because the more we understand, the better equipped we are to really make a difference.
Exactly. Knowledge is power.
So to everyone listening out there, keep gigging, keep questioning, and keep learning.
That's it.
And until next time, happy diving.
See you in the next deep dive.